This is going to be a short video that shows you what you need to set up ahead of time for our membrane stress experiment so that you'll be able to finish in the time that you have during our lab for those of you who are at home. What you're going to need is your half of a beet. You're eventually going to be getting 6 cores out of that beet. What you need immediately are going to be 2 of them. So right now I'm just going to extract 2. I'm going to use my cork borer, and I do believe that I neglected to give you the nail or glass rod to push your beet cores out. So I think that your thermometer, if we use it carefully, can also work that purpose. Mine, that I think is similar to what I gave you, does fit and will push those beet cores out. So I have just cut out 2 of them. The first thing I'm going to do is take a knife. You'll need to get that from your kitchen. And I'm going to cut it. And I'm going to measure them so that they are just 1.5 centimeters. They're not going to be very long. So I'll line them up, and then I will cut them evenly so they are just 1.5 centimeters. Now, because I've just extracted them, they have beet juice on the outside. I want to rinse that off. I'm just going to dunk them into a cup of water, rinse them off a tad bit. I'll get a paper towel ready, put them on some paper towel, pat them dry like so. Then you have 2 test tubes. One is labeled F for refrigerator, and one is labeled R for freezer. Or if they're not labeled, feel free to write on them. So F is going to be freezer, R is going to be refrigerator. I just put 1 core in each of those, and now I'm going to go to my refrigerator, and I'm going to place the refrigerator in the refrigerator and the freezer in the freezer, and they're going to sit there for 30 minutes or longer. And that's it. All you need to do is get that set up, and then the rest of it will set up in the lab. So that will be in the second part of this video. All right, we are back for part 2 of our membrane stress experiment for those who are performing the experiment at home. Right now we have 2 of our beet cores in the freezer and in the refrigerator. So we need 4 more cores. So let's get those cores. And remember, you can use your thermometer very carefully, since I think I've neglected to give you a nail to push your cores out of your cork borer. So there's 1, there's 2, number 3, and number 4. These all need to be cut to the same length, and we need to cut off the skin. And therefore I'm going to line them up just like we did with our potato and vegetable lab for water potential. And I'm going to initially just cut off the skin. Then I'm going to measure so that they are now 1.5 centimeters long. And there we go. All right, they are now all the same length. So the next thing I'm going to do is just rinse them off a little bit. Dip them in a cup of plain old tap water. Whoa, almost got too much tap water there, it's spilling over. And then I'm going to put them on this paper towel and pat them dry. Now what we need to do is expose them to temperatures, various temperatures. We're going to try for room temperature around 40 degrees, 55, and 70. So in order to get those temperatures, you need to put a pan of water on the stove. You don't need a lot of water, so the less water you have, the faster it's going to heat up. So there's my pan of water. I'm going to turn it on high. I'm going to use my thermometer. And when it gets to about 40 degrees, I'm going to drop one of the beets in there. One of these beets is just going to be at room temperature. So my pan is covering up my video here. So one of my beets is going to be at room temperature. I have my 4 test tubes. I've labeled them 22, 40, 55, 70. These might not be the exact temperatures we end up using, but that'll get us pretty close. So I'm just going to take one of these beets and I'm going to put it into the 22. That's going to be room temperature. Then I'm going to wait here for a moment while my water heats up. And it is currently at about 23. So as soon as it heats up, we'll continue. All right, so I am just waiting here, watching my water temperature carefully. It is getting close to 40 degrees. And when it gets to 40 degrees, it's almost there. I'm going to drop one beet core in. There it goes. And I'm going to time that for 1 minute. So set my timer here. Now my temperature's going up, so I'm going to move my pot off my burner so that the temperature doesn't keep going up. And it's about 40, it's gone up a little bit, maybe 43 or so. I'm going to leave that beet core in there for 1 minute. And you can either use a plain old ordinary spoon to scoop it out. If your family happens to have a slotted spoon, that might be a little bit easier. But after 1 minute, I'm going to pick that beet core out of my pot. So it's got another 20 seconds to go. All right, 1 minute is up. So I'm going to take my beet core out. I'm going to place it on paper towel, pat it dry, and then I'm going to put it into my test tube here that's labeled 40. And it will sit there for a minute while we do the other temperatures. So now I'll put my pot back on the burner. It is currently reading 40. When it gets to 55, we're going to repeat that process. I think this time, as soon as it reaches 55, I will take my pot off my burner. All right, I'm ready with my core. I'm going to drop it in my 55-degree water, move it off to the side, and then I'm going to time it for 1 minute. All right, that's my minute. I'm going to take that beet out, put it on paper towel, pat it dry, put it into the test tube that's labeled 55. Then I'm going to put my water back on my burner there and let it heat up to 70. In the meantime, I'm going to take my cup of water where I had rinsed my beets, and I'm going to place that, pour that in the sink and get clean water. I want this to be perfectly clean water. This is the water that we will cover our beets with. All right, it's at 70. So I'm going to drop my last core in there, and I'll remove my pot from the burner. I'm going to turn off my burner. Don't forget to do that. And we'll leave it in there for a minute. Okay, 6, gets to 7. While that's sitting in there for a minute, I can toss away my leftover beets. If you want to bring it in and compost it, if you don't have your own compost, you can do that. But we're done with the beet. The only thing we have left is we're now going to place, set this to the side here. We're now going to place 10 mils of water into each of our test tubes. So at this point, I only have my 4 test tubes. I need to get my test tubes from the refrigerator and the freezer. So I'll do that now. At some point, it would be great if you could measure the actual temperature in your refrigerator and in your freezer so we'd know what those are. Mine is about 5 degrees in the refrigerator and about -12 in the freezer. All right, that's been a minute, so I'm going to take my last piece of beet out of my pot, put it on some paper towel here, pat it dry, and put that in the last beaker. All right, there we go. So now I have 6 beet cores in 6 test tubes, and now I just need to cover each one with 10 mils of clean water. So I'll use my syringe and measure 10 mils of water. Oh, that's got a little air in it. Try to get that out. And here we go. Here's 10 in the freezer. In the refrigerator, 10 at room temperature, which is around 22 here in school, 10 in the 40, 10 in the 55, 10 in the 70. And now I'm going to start my timer, and we want it to sit there for 20 minutes or so. Ideally, if we can let it sit for 30 minutes, we will. We'll just have to see how our class time goes. So I'm going to start my timer. All right, let's assume that 30 minutes has gone by. Unfortunately, yesterday when I filmed this part of the program, I didn't turn on the video. So things are going to look slightly different than what you have right now. Right now, you have 6 test tubes sitting in your rack, and you can probably see some color accumulating at the bottom. The next step is to mix those up. I'm going to go to the refrigerator and get my test tube, but mine are already mixed up. So what you're going to do next is, remember this is just a beaten water, so there's nothing at all wrong about touching these. You're going to take each test tube and put your thumb over the top and mix it once, mix it twice. You're just trying to get that color that has now settled at the bottom and to get that distributed throughout your test tube. These test tubes are really fogging up. They've been in the refrigerator and now that's condensing on the outside. And one more. We'll mix those up. Okay, now in school, students are going to be using a spectrophotometer to measure how pink each of those is. At home, you're going to be using your eyeballs to rank them. So I want you to devise a score from 0 to 10. 10 is going to be the pinkest one you have, the pink reddest one you have, and you're going to call that a 10. 0 is going to represent perfectly clear, and none of yours might be perfectly clear, but I want you to then give them a score from 0 to 10 about how clear each of those test tubes is. And finally, what you're going to do is take a photo. So use your camera, take a photo of your tubes, and you're going to end up sharing that photo with the class here so that we can see what your results look like compared to our results. So at this point, you are done gathering your data. You'll be joining us in class to see what we're doing with our spectrophotometers to actually get some values, and now you can clean up. So cleanup for you involves taking each of these to your sinks, throwing that away. You can do whatever you want to with the little sprigs. You can toss away your beet, we don't need that, and then rinse all that out, put it back into your tub. So you'll be returning in your tub tomorrow the test tube rack, the cup, the thermometer, the ruler, the cork borer, the syringe. All of those items should come back to me, and we will see you in class tomorrow, and we'll see you on Zoom here for the rest of our lab.